The woman's hands trembled as she pressed them against the dying calf's chest. Marcus Thorne watched from the barn doorway, his breath caught somewhere between his throat and his lungs. The calf had been still as stone when he'd found it that morning. Another victim of the fever that had been killing livestock across 3 counties. Now, impossibly, the animal's flanks rose and fell with shallow breath. How? The word escaped him like a prayer. She didn't look up. Her palms remained flat against the calf's ribs, and in the dim light filtering through the barn slats, Marcus could swear he saw something. A faint glow, warm as candlelight, emanating from where her skin met fur. The calf's eyes fluttered open. "Don't ask questions you ain't ready to hear," answered. Her voice carried the weight of someone who'd spoken those words before. Marcus had found her 3 days ago, half dead from thirst on the edge of his property. A woman alone in the territory was trouble enough, but this one carried herself different, like she was listening to sounds the rest of the world couldn't hear. She'd given her name as Elena, nothing more, no family, no destination, no story worth telling, she'd said. The calf struggled to its feet, unsteady but alive. "The fever's been spreading for weeks," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Killed near every head of cattle from here to Silver Creek. Veterinarian from town said it was hopeless." Elena finally looked at him. Her eyes were the color of storm clouds, and they held secrets he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Sometimes hopeless ain't as final as folks think. Thunder rumbled in the distance, though the sky had been clear an hour ago. Elena's hands, Marcus noticed for the first time, bore thin white scars across both palms. Scars that looked deliberate, purposeful. When she stood brushing hay from her worn skirt, those hands caught the light in a way that made his chest tighten with something between fear and wonder. "Mr. Thorne," she said, and he realized he'd never told her his name. "You might want to think hard about what you saw here today, and what you're gonna tell folks when they come asking." The sound of approaching hoofbeats drifted through the barn walls. 6 riders pulled up to Marcus's front porch as the sun reached its peak. He recognized them all, neighbors, men he'd shared whiskey with, traded cattle with, men whose word carried weight in these parts. But today they wore the hard expressions of a jury that had already reached its verdict. Marcus, Bill Hendricks dismounted first, his hand resting casual-like on his gun belt. "We need to talk." Elena stood in the doorway of the barn, watching. The calf she'd saved grazed peacefully in the paddock beside its mother, both animals healthy as spring grass. But the other men's eyes weren't on the miracle, they were fixed on the woman who'd made it possible. "Tom Bradley's boy saw her," Hendricks continued. "Said she was talking to his sick horse yesterday evening, touching it with those marked-up hands of hers. This morning, horse was up and running like nothing happened." "That's good news," Marcus said carefully. "Is it?" Another rider, Jack Morrison, spat into the dust. "My cousin's spread lost 12 head last week. The widow Patterson's got nothing left but bones and buzzards. But this woman shows up, and suddenly animals start rising from their deathbeds." Marcus felt Elena's gaze on him from across the yard. She hadn't run, hadn't hidden. She stood there like she was waiting for him to choose sides in a war he hadn't known was coming. "What exactly you boys suggesting?" "We're suggesting," Hendricks said, "that there's only one way a person brings the dead back to life, and it ain't through prayer." The word hung in the air like smoke, which, they didn't have to say it. It was written in their rigid postures, their nervous horses, the way they kept their distance, as if evil itself might be catching. "Now hold on." "No, Marcus, you hold on." Morrison's voice carried an edge sharp enough to cut. "You been harboring her. That makes you complicit in whatever dark dealings she's been up to." Elena stepped forward then, her scarred hands visible in the bright sunlight. "These men got something they want to say to me, they can say it direct." The horses shied at her approach, snorting and stamping. Hendricks's mount tried to bolt, and it took all his strength to keep the animals steady. "See that?" Morrison pointed at the spooked horses. "Animals know, they can smell the devil on her." Marcus looked at Elena's hands again, really looked. The scars weren't random. They formed patterns, symbols he didn't recognize, but that made something deep in his chest go cold. When she caught him staring, she didn't look away. "Choose careful, Marcus Thorne," she said quietly. "Some choices can't be undone. In town, church bells began to toll 6 times. Sunset was still hours away. By evening, smoke rose from 3 different points on the horizon. Not wildfire smoke, the controlled, purposeful smoke of signal fires. Elena stood at Marcus's kitchen window, watching the distant flames with eyes that held no surprise. "They're calling others," she said. "By midnight there'll be 50 men out there, maybe more." Marcus checked his rifle for the 3rd time in an hour. "This is insane. You helped their animals, saved them. That's the problem." Elena turned from the window. "Folks can handle loss. They understand it, expect it. But miracles," she shook her head. "Miracles make people think about what else might be possible, makes them question things they'd rather leave unquestioned." Outside, the wind picked up, carrying voices, not words, but the low rumble of men gathering, planning. Marcus had heard that sound before, during the war. It was the sound that came before violence. "There's a root cellar," he said. "Hidden entrance behind the wood pile. You could. Running won't solve this. Men like that, they don't forget. They'll hunt me till I'm in the ground, and they'll come after anyone who helped me get away." A new sound joined the wind, the rhythmic beat of horse hooves, dozens of them, moving in formation. Through the window, Marcus could see torchlight flickering between the trees. They weren't waiting for midnight. Elena moved to the center of the room and knelt, pressing her scarred palms flat against the wooden floor. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in an instant, and frost began forming along the window glass despite the warm evening. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done 3 days ago." Her voice carried an odd harmonic, like she was speaking in chorus with someone else. "I'm calling in old debts." The hoofbeats stopped. In the sudden silence, Marcus could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. Then came the voice he'd been dreading, Bill Hendricks, amplified by a speaking trumpet. "Elena Vasquez, you're accused of witchcraft and consorting with dark forces. Come out peaceful, and we'll make it quick." Elena's hands pressed harder against the floor. The frost on the windows spread inward, creating intricate patterns that looked almost like writing in a language Marcus had never seen. "Vasquez," he whispered. "That name, my grandmother's name," Elena said without looking up. "The one they burned in Santa Fe 20 years ago. The one who made them promise to leave her bloodline alone if they took her life." Outside, someone lit the first torch, then another. Soon the yard blazed with firelight, and Marcus could count 47 mounted men arranged in a perfect circle around his house. "They broke their promise," Elena continued. "Now I'm gonna collect on mine." The temperature plummeted further, and in the growing cold, Marcus began to hear something else. The sound of hoofbeats that weren't quite right, moving through ground that should have been solid. "Wait." Marcus knelt beside Elena, his hand hovering just above her shoulder. "Before you do whatever you're about to do, I need to know something." She looked up at him, and for the first time since he'd found her, he saw not the mysterious woman with storm cloud eyes, but someone young, tired, and desperately alone. "Ask." "The scars on your hands. You didn't choose them, did you?" Elena's expression cracked slightly. "My grandmother cut them into my palms when I was 7 years old. Said the old ways needed to be preserved, passed down. Said the world would try to kill what it didn't understand, but someone had to carry the knowledge forward." Marcus saw it then, not the witch the men outside feared, but a child who'd been marked and burdened with powers she'd never asked for. "She was trying to protect you. She was trying to protect everyone." Elena's voice broke slightly. "The healing, the animal whispers, the weather calling, it's all connected to balance. Take too much from the earth, and it starts dying. Animals get sick, crops fail, people suffer. Someone has to maintain the equilibrium." Outside, Hendricks shouted again, "5 minutes, or we burn the house with you in it." Elena started to press her hands back to the floor, but Marcus caught her wrist gently. "The thing you're about to call up, will innocent men die?" She met his eyes directly. "Do you consider them innocent? Some of them maybe. Morrison's got 3 kids. Hendricks just lost his wife to fever last winter. They're scared, not evil." Elena's hands trembled in his grip. "My grandmother died screaming because people were scared. Fear's killed more innocents than evil ever has. But you're not your grandmother. The words hung between them like a bridge. Neither was sure they could cross. Outside, the men were arguing among themselves. Marcus could hear Morrison's voice raised in protest, someone else talking about giving them more time. "If I don't stop them here," Elena said quietly, "they'll follow me until I'm dead, and the next person like me, and the next. The old knowledge dies, and when the balance finally breaks completely, everyone suffers." Marcus thought of the calf, healthy and alive in his paddock, of the stories his own grandmother had told, about people who could speak to the earth itself, who could heal what was broken. What if there was another way? Elena searched his face. What way? What if someone stood with you, someone they trusted? The sound of approaching hoofbeats grew louder, but these came from the wrong direction, from the north where the old burial grounds lay. Elena's summoning was working. "They'll call you a witch too," she whispered. "Maybe, or maybe they'll listen." Marcus Thorne stepped onto his front porch, with his hands raised and his rifle left inside. 47 torches flickered in the darkness, casting dancing shadows across 47 hard faces. "Bill," he called out. "Jack, Tom, you all know me." "We know you've been harboring a witch," Hendricks replied. "I've been harboring a healer." Marcus's voice carried clear across the yard. "And every damn one of you would do the same if you'd seen what I've seen." He gestured toward the paddock where the calf grazed peacefully beside its mother. "That animal was dead this morning, stone cold." Elena brought it back, not with curses or devil worship, but with knowledge passed down from her grandmother, knowledge about how to help things heal. "Witchcraft," Morrison spat. "Medicine," Marcus countered. "Same as any doctor uses, just older, different." Behind him, the front door opened, and Elena stepped out. She'd removed the worn shawl that usually covered her hands, and the white scars across her palms were clearly visible in the torchlight. "My grandmother," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the still air, "was burned by men like you 20 years ago in Santa Fe. She died because she could heal animals they couldn't heal, because she knew which plants stopped bleeding, and which ones eased pain. They called her a witch because her knowledge was different from theirs." The temperature began to drop again, but this time Elena wasn't kneeling. This time the cold came from the north, where the burial grounds lay. "But before she died," Elena continued, "she made them promise to leave her bloodline alone. They swore an oath on their mother's graves, that they'd let her knowledge pass to her granddaughter in peace." From the darkness beyond the torchlight came the sound of hoofbeats, but not from living horses. The men's mounts began to shy and whicker nervously. "That oath was witnessed by the dead," Elena said, "and the dead don't forget promises made in their names." Spectral figures began to materialize at the edge of the firelight, translucent riders on ghostly horses, their faces bearing the weathered features of men who'd lived and died on this harsh land. Marcus recognized some of them, his own father dead these 10 years. Bill Hendricks's grandfather, men who'd fought and died to build this territory. The ghost of Marcus's father nudged his ethereal horse forward. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of the grave. "An oath was sworn," the specter said. "Blood for peace." The girl was to be left alone. Hendricks's torch wavered in his grip. We didn't know." "Ignorance," said another ghost, "ain't absolution." But Elena stepped forward, her scarred hands raised. "I release you from the oath," she said clearly. "My grandmother's debt is paid, but I claim the right to live free, to use my knowledge to help rather than harm." She turned to the living men. "Your animals are sick because the land is out of balance, too much taking, not enough giving back. I can teach you how to heal them, how to work with the earth instead of against it, but only if you choose knowledge over fear." The ghosts waited, silent as tombstones. Morrison was the first to lower his torch, then Tom Bradley. One by one, the flames went out until only Hendricks held fire. "Your choice, Bill," Marcus said quietly. Hendricks looked at the spectral figures, at Elena's scarred hands, at the healthy calf grazing peacefully in the moonlight. Finally he extinguished his torch. The ghosts faded like morning mist. Epilogue 3 years later, Marcus would watch Elena teach the Morrison children how to identify healing plants along the creek bed. The fever that had killed so many animals was gone, controlled by knowledge that was no longer hidden but shared freely. She never did tell him all her secrets, but she stayed. And on quiet evenings when the wind was right, Marcus would sometimes see her standing in the paddock, her scarred hands pressed against the earth, listening to sounds the rest of the world was only just learning to hear. The last frame of their story was simple: a woman and a man standing together in a place where fear had been replaced by understanding, where the old knowledge lived on not in shadows but in sunlight.